Welcome to the Talking Cities podcast with Matt Enstis and friends. Talking Cities is the place where we talk and investigate cutting-edge innovations for cities in America and beyond, featuring people working to create vibrant, healthier, and more sustainable communities and exploring the beauty and creativity in it all. On this week's episode, the BNMC Director of Inclusion and Community Initiatives, Kyria Stevens, sits with Zeneta Everhart, Director of Diversity and Inclusion for New York State Senator Tim Kennedy. Zeneta is a Buffalo native, born and raised on the East Side. She holds an associate's degree from Villa Maria and a BA from Canisius College, where she studied TV production and interpersonal communications. After graduation, she accepted a position to work for Spectrum News as a breaking news photographer and eventually became a producer. After 6 years working in news and media, Everhart made a career leap into politics, accepting a position with Tim Kennedy, where her focus is on ensuring equity through legislation, policy, and equitable distribution of resources. Zeneta's story is not done, and she has so much more happening. Listen in as Kyria and Zeneta discuss where she is now, what's new, and how life activities have changed her life completely. Let's dive in. Welcome to Talking Cities.
Hi, everyone. This is Kyria Stevens, Director of Inclusion and Community Initiatives for Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, here in for Matt Enstis, and I am so glad to be here with Zeneta Everhart, the New York State Senate Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Senator Tim Kennedy. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Kyria, for having me.
Yeah, so I mean, this is going to be a really good conversation because you're an awesome person, and I want to say that.
Thank you.
On air.
All the feels.
Yes, all the feels. So, but before we get into all the stuff that you're doing right now, as I was doing research, I came up with something very interesting to me, and I'm sure others would think it's very interesting, that you used to be behind the scenes in television as a. So talk to us a little bit about that before we get into it.
So my background is in television and news. Mm-hmm. I went to Canisius College, where I studied TV production. And I always wanted to work in media. I always wanted to be a journalist. I mean, truthfully, I wanted to be Oprah, right? Uh-huh. Like, I was like, I'm going to have a TV show, like I was going to be Barbara Walters. But I've always loved media, right? Yeah. And I really wanted to be a part of that, and kind of talking, for me, it was about changing the narrative, right? And so we watch the news a lot, and we see the news coverage around what happens on the east side of Buffalo. And majority of it is negative, right? But there's some amazing things happening on the east side of Buffalo. And so even back then, when I started in 2011 at Spectrum News, I really just wanted to tell the good stories, right? Like I wanted to navigate that space. And so, I worked for Spectrum News after I graduated from Canisius. I did that for 6 years. I was a breaking news photographer. I worked the shift that nobody wants to work, right? When all the bad things are happening. I worked overnights. At one point, I was going into work at 3 a.m. And then I started going into work around 10 and working complete overnights. And then a few years later, I got promoted to producer. And that's when I, started writing all the stories and, reaching out to community organizations and bringing them into the studios, sending cameras out to go talk to people about what's going on in their neighborhood and stuff like that. So, I did that for 6 years, 6 long years. Wow. And it was amazing. Yeah. I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
So you talked about changing the narrative. What made you, is that the reason why you shifted and went the way you, or just talk to me a little bit about why you went the direction that you went?
Yeah, they always say, you find a job when you're not looking, right? I was happy in news and media. I loved my job. And one day I got a call, actually, the Senator Kennedy's communications director, Molly Hirschbeck. We worked together at Spectrum News. And so she had left the senator's office 3 years prior. And one day she called me and she's like, the senator has an opportunity that he wants to talk to you about. He's looking to do some new things on the east side of Buffalo, and he wants someone from that neighborhood who can help him, kind of, guide him in how he can help the people and help the residents. And I was like, that's a job, wait, right. You gonna pay me to, go into my community and talk to people in my neighborhood? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, like, you know, of course I'm going to do this. And so here we are 6 years later.
So,
yeah.
And so it was 6 years there. Now it's been 6 years here. Like, what has been some of the difference between what you were doing then and what you're doing now? And like, what are some of the really impactful things just on, cause there's tons of impactful things that you've done, but just for in the office of the Senator Tim Kennedy's office.
So, you know, it really has been about making sure that the senator hears directly from the people. That's number one. That's my number one job. And he wants to connect with them to figure out how he can help, because we all know that, you know, legislation guides our lives, right? Laws and bills, and that's his job. And so what I do, a big part of what I do is I work in legislation, making sure that, you know, the legislation that the senator is either supporting or putting forward is looked at through a racial equity lens, right? We want to make sure that any laws that are coming down in the state of New York is, you know, helping Black and brown people and not hurting them, right? Because we know history tells us, right, that, you know, this country is, you know, there's systemic racism in this country and it's built into the laws in this country. And so we want to make sure that, you know, we're revamping that and we're looking at it in a different way. And so that's one of my jobs that I do, but also I do grassroots work. Right. I do on the ground in the community work, working with the block clubs, working with local 501c3s. I do a lot of community programming through the senator's office. Back in 2018, I started Single Moms Club Buffalo. And for me, it was, you know, when I started with the senator, he was like, what is missing on the east side of Buffalo? What can I really do? And he said, you know, put together a plan. Tell me where we can, you know, have the most impact. And so what I did was I put together this East Side blueprint, right? And one of the things that was in there was the Single Moms Club. Because as a single mother who was working, going to college and raising a kid, you know, it was very hard to navigate life, period, right? And so for me, when I got into this position, I really wanted to do something for our single mothers. And so what I did was I created, it's basically an event. We do it bi-monthly in the evenings, and we do them in the neighborhoods, right? We've worked with Buffalo Public Schools. We've worked with Roswell. We've worked with so many different organizations to host events for single moms. And we go into a space, doesn't matter where it is, but we bring in all types of resources that you know, whatever a single mom would need, right? Yeah. And so I'm talking everything from daycare, right? We're talking about mental health, period, right? We hosted an event one time where women were able to get free mammograms when we partner with ECMC, you know, so we've done a host of different things, just bringing information for single moms. But we make the events fun, right? Because single moms, we know, are busy and they don't have time to just do them. Right. And so what we did is we bring in paint night for the moms. We've done yoga. We've done Zumba. We've done manicures and massages and all different types of things. And they can bring their kids. Okay. Right. And so what we do is we get volunteers from the community to come in and take the kids away in a separate space, but in the same building. And the kids have their own activities. Right. And so, you know, and those events are crazy in all the best ways. Okay. Because so many people come. Right. And it just shows that there is a need, right? There is a need. We should be providing resources to people in their neighborhoods. Yeah. And it's really taken off. I think we've served over 4,500 women since 2018. Wow. And they continue to come to these events because they're needed. They're necessary. Absolutely. So those are just two of the things that I do in the senator's office.
I love that. So you said you make sure that the senator is looking at things from a racial equity lens. You know, there's so much to unpack there, but
so many things.
You know, one of our things, you know, here at BNMC is integrating networks, and you know, we have. I say this all the time: people's mind thinks where their feet stand, and if you haven't been on the east side, you really don't understand the east side. So, why do you think it is important? Now, I know, but why, if for the average listener or the person who doesn't get it, why do you think? Because the senator is not just the senator of the East Side, but why does the East Side matter so much in the grand scheme of things?
Because it's
racial equity, period.
Right, right. It's a forgotten place, right? Over the years, there's been so much disinvestment on the East Side of Buffalo. I'm 42 years old, and the East Side of Buffalo has looked the same my whole life. It has not changed, and that's a problem. And the senator recognizes that, and he recognized that he couldn't be the person to go in and change that, right? That's true allyship right there, right? He knew the issues, he saw the issues, but he wanted somebody who could actually go in there and connect with the people.
Yeah.
And someone who already went through those issues, right? Or who were dealing with those issues, right? I tell people that all the time, that, the work that I'm doing in the senator's office is also helping me, right? Because I'm from this community. I'm born and raised there. So it's very, very important that we have people, I don't know who said this quote. I should probably look it up one day, but the person who is closest to the problem is closest to the solution, right? And so that is literally my job. Yeah. I've been in it. I've dealt with it. I didn't have the best upbringing, right? I come from extreme humble beginnings, right? I had a mother who had a drug addiction. She was a single parent raising 3 children in the house. It was a lot for us growing up, right? We dealt with no electricity in the house and eating pork and beans and hot dogs for dinner every day, right? So we come from extremely humble beginnings. And so for me, it's very, very important that I am using my voice, right? Because I have a voice, I have a platform, I have the senator's ear, right? And so I can literally tell him, I went to this community center and this is happening over there. How do we help them, right? I talk to these parents. This is what they're dealing with. How can we help them? And it's about building connections. So throughout the years, working in the senator's office, I've sat at many tables, right, where I was the only Black person at that table, the only woman a lot of times at that table, right? And so for me, it's about talking to people that I never thought that I would be sitting at a table with, right? But making the East Side of Buffalo real, right? Humanizing the people on the East Side. Because I think a lot of times we don't realize, for whatever reason, these are people. Yeah. These are human beings, right? And our government is supposed to be there to help them. Yeah. And so it is literally my job to open up government and give it to the people.
Yeah. So for those who don't have the senator's ear, how do they, use their influence or power? How do they get involved?
Yeah, reach out, call me. And the thing is, I don't have all the answers. I'm not one of those people who think I'm the smartest person in the room, but I do surround myself with a lot of smart people. Yeah. And so if I don't know, someone I know does know, right? And so I always tell people, just call, make one phone call. You never, especially young people, right? I talk to a lot of young people on the East Side of Buffalo, and I tell them all the time, if you have a question about somebody, ask about something, ask the question. Yeah. Ask a teacher, ask a mentor, ask your parents, ask anybody. Somebody is going to have an answer for you, and they're going to be able to help you. You have to just be willing to put yourself out there and ask the question.
Yeah. Well, you've helped so many so far, and one thing I kind of want to shift to is 514. You talked about being a single mother, and your son was, one of the people who was shot during 514. And since that time, you've done so much. But let's just start with 514, and from there, to talk about, we know that the racist shooter targeted the East Side because of the demographics. Talk to me about that and what you're doing going forward to kind of help change that.
Yeah, so Zaire, my kid, the kid as I call him, he worked at Tops, and the crazy thing about that is, Zaire is he's such a teddy bear and such a loving kid. And, when he got that job, he actually started working in the middle of the pandemic. And it was July of 2020 when he got that job. And I remember he was like, Mom, I want to get a job. He's not in school. It's summertime, but it's a pandemic.
How are you feeling about that? I don't mean to cut you out.
Listen, let me tell you something. I was like, no. Wait. I was like, hold. Like, and he's like, well, I could get a job at a grocery store because that's really the only thing open. And I'm thinking that's ground zero for COVID. Yeah.
So
right?
He's serving like front lines.
I was like, what are you thinking? Yeah. Like, what is wrong with you? And, but it's just who he is. He wanted to help people, in the midst of, the crazy pandemic. Zaire started working at Thompson, when 514 happened. Boy, he was there. He was at work, standing outside, helping customers, doing what he does every day when he was shot. And he was, he was helping Mrs. Pearl Young at the moment when he was shot right outside of the store. And, that was a day.
I didn't know he was helping Pearl. Pearl was very influential in my life. She, taught Sunday school, and I would go to that church because my best friend went to, to that church. So,
So when he was shot, he got away from the store with the help of one of his other coworkers, and and he called me. Wow. I was his first call across the street, right on Riley Street. Where he was laying on the ground bleeding out. Zaire was shot in his neck, in the right side of his neck, and it went out his back. And he called me screaming, and he's like, Mom, get here now. I got shot. And boy, oh boy, I have never felt anything like that in my body. I mean, my body reacted to that. And, the ambulance got to him. Got him to the hospital. I remember we were on the phone and the EMT said, don't come to the scene. She was like, you don't want to go up there. She was like, just meet us at the hospital, and that was even more traumatic, right? Because I stayed on the phone with him until right when I got to ECMC in the parking lot, and his phone hung up. And I remember just spazzing out. I spazzed out because I didn't know, right? And I get in the hospital and they're not telling me anything and no one's telling me anything. They wouldn't let me see him. And, of course you think the worst, right? You think the worst in a moment like that. And finally I got to see him, and he was badly wounded, but he was alive, and boy, what a year it's been since then, right? Since then, it's been crazy. First and foremost, it was just making sure Zaire was okay. He was in a hospital for about 6 hours, and they actually let him go home. And, it was sleepless nights and, a lot of throwing out bed sheets because he was bleeding everywhere. And just, it was a lot for him. That was a lot for him. And for me, it was, this is my kid. What do I do now? Right? My son was shot by a terrorist, a racist terrorist in our community, blocks from our house. We live just blocks from the Tops grocery store. And so for me, it was about using my platform. I know I had a platform. I knew people would listen to me. And so that's what I did. That's what I did. So
you went and you advocated for gun legislation. Talk to me about that, and from there, you did that, and which led to some other things, and then you started the first ever Black Caucus for Buffalo, and you have more things on the horizon. So, let's start there. How did you get on the floor? Like, what made you, how did you compose yourself? What was your mind? Because I know there had to be tons of things going through your mind. Like how, I don't know if Matt Cuss is on here, but how the hell did you allow, has this legislation not changed? Like talk to me about that.
Yeah. And people said that to me a lot. They're like, you're doing these news interviews. You're so composed and calm. And I was just thinking, I am a mess. I was a mess throughout that time. My friends and family who were there with me in Zaire day in and day out, they saw that. But for me, when people called me to talk about, my son being shot by a racist, Mama Bear came out, right? You want to talk about it? Let's talk about it, right? And that's how I felt, right? Like I had to do something to pay it forward. So I actually, Congressman Brian Higgins called me one day, and he's like, we are going to have, the Oversight Committee will be meeting about 514. But actually at that point, it was also about what happened in Uvalde on 10 days after 514, right? 21 people lost their lives that day, May 24th. That's actually my birthday. And I'll never forget that day. And so when Congressman Brian Higgins called me and he's like, I want you to testify and talk about what happened to Zaire and also talk about your community. And that's what I did. So I went to Washington and I testified before the Oversight Committee, and I let them have it. Quite frankly, like I was angry. I was mad, right? But I know that, being angry and being mad doesn't solve our problems, right? I wanted to sit at that table and tell them about themselves. And also talk about the east side of Buffalo, the place that I love, the place that I live, right? And so, just a week or two later, after I testified on June 8th last year, we passed the first gun reform legislation in over 30 years in this country. And that's a win. That's a win for this country. That is a win for Zaire. That is a win for those 10 families. That is a win for the families in Uvalde and all the families, who have been touched by a domestic terrorist in their community. So, and then I just kept going,
That's what I want to talk about, how you just kept going and you keep going. So first annual this year was the Buffalo Black Caucus. It was during the 514 weekend. What made, what sparked that idea? I know that it came from, what made you want to do it the way you did it?
Yeah. Well, before I go into that, one other thing that I didn't mention is, so following 514, people were reaching out to us from all over the world, really, and they wanted to know how they could help Zaire. And so, they're like, where's your GoFundMe? We can't find one. We want to send him money. And I was like, don't send us money. We were just like, what? I don't know what you can do, So me and Zaire and a couple of friends, we sat and we were just like, what could we do? And one of the things that I spoke about continuously, because I read that domestic terrorist manifesto, right? And for me, he's uninformed, right? And he's miseducated about Black people in this country. And so we decided to start Zeneta and Zaire's book club. And what we did was we created an Amazon wish list where people could go on and buy books that teach kids about racism and acceptance and diversity. And there's just books on there that just feature Black kids, right? Because representation matters, right? We need our children seeing themselves in books, right? Because that changes their perspective on life. And so to date, we've collected, oh my goodness, I don't even know how many books we have. I think it's probably around 19,000 books we've collected. And we go around the community and we distribute those books. For Black History Month, we partner with the Buffalo Bills, and we did a bunch of community readings and distributions of the books. And it's just been a beautiful initiative. And we partner with Villa Maria College, and that is the home of Zeneta and Zaire's book club. And so, that's just been amazing because, education is very important, and our education system in this country needs a complete overhaul. And we have to make sure that we are teaching all children about African-American history in this country. And that's where, that's how Zeneta and Zaire's book club, was born. But back to your original question.
No. There's something that you said in there that and this is why I wish we had a lot more time. And some of this might have to be off air, but You talked about education and everyone knowing, about Black people and but we're seeing in other states where they're banning diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah,
they're banning books about Black people and our history, and they're against critical race theory, and saying that trying to erase part or not at least not talk about the nasty parts of American history. What do you, being in in government and dealing in diversity, equity, and inclusion, how do you combat that? How do you educate people that this is not the way we should be going? What do you say?
Well, you have to attack the system, right? What Florida, let's just be specific, right? What Florida is doing is systemic racism. Yeah. They're literally upholding systemic racism. And they know that when people know about themselves and when other people know about the history of this country, it's going to change the tide on racism. Yeah. So they're smart. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing, but it's okay because we out here. Yeah. Right? Like I'm not going to let that happen. Yeah. There are millions of people in this country who are not going to let that happen. Right. Our children need to know their history. Right. All children in this country need to be educated on this country's greatest sin, right? Like when we go to therapy, right? All of our therapists will tell us, in order to deal with your problems, you have to admit that they're there and that you have a problem. And so America has to admit that it's racist and it's built on racism. And we can't just throw that in a closet and act like it's not happening, right? And so that's why, that is why I'm pushing for this book club and, just making sure that children are educated, but also having conversations with lawmakers across the state about how do we implement more African-American history into the curriculum, because that is where it starts, right? Yes, we can go talk to a 60-year-old about, his racist ideologies, but if we start with our children, because children don't care if you're Black, white, or purple, they just want you to share their Legos, right? Like that's all they care about. So if we start with our children and showing them that Black people are just like them, right? That's where it starts for me. We have to start with our children.
Right. So part of it is educating others about history, but also it's building up the ideology and the confidence of Black people as well. So
Absolutely.
Back to the Buffalo Black Caucus. Talk to me about it.
The inaugural Buffalo Black Caucus. Listen, after 5/14, right, we as Black people, we experience racism every day. This is not new to us, right? We experience systemic racism. And, a lot of people talked about not just what happened on 5/14, but they talked about the closing of the only grocery store in that neighborhood, right? They talked about the streets in that neighborhood. They talked about the housing stock in that neighborhood, right? They talked about the health disparities in that neighborhood. And so that literally is how the Buffalo Black Caucus was born, right? A bunch of us got together and said, let's do something. Let's provide resources and information to people in the community. And it's about time, right? We need a space, and this is going to happen every year, where we are teaching people about the resources that are available to them, right? One of, the most popular parts of the Black Caucus was our home ownership seminar that we did. And it was supposed to last like 20 minutes and it went for an hour and a half. Okay. People want the information.
Is that what a caucus is?
It's information. Okay. It's educating people on resources that are available to them, educating them on programming that is available to them. And that's what the Black Caucus is. We did stuff on civics and on food justice, environmental justice. We have so many partners in the Buffalo Black Caucus, but this is something that I feel is missing in our community. And that's why we did it. And what a beautiful event that it was.
Absolutely.
Right. And I can't wait till next year.
Right. So I'm gonna, because our time is kind of running out. I want to get to what you're doing now. Like, I mean, you're doing a lot now, but it seems like you might be making a shift and pivoting, not just, from working in, at the state to working in the local government. And you are right now, you're running for, what are you running for?
I am running for the Maston District Common Council seat, and I am excited. For me, it is about, so I tell people this all the time. There's a place for people, for advocacy, and for marches, and for rallies. We need that in our community. Right. But what we need more is people inside those buildings who are actually listening to the needs of the people who are marching, right? And that's what I want to do. Yeah. I want to go in there and open up government and make sure that the people have access to the things that they need. Yeah. I'm not a power-hungry person. I'm not doing this for power. I don't even want the power. I want to give it away. Yeah. It's not for me. It is for the people. And for too long, the people in the Maston District feel like they're not being heard and they're not getting access to the things that they need. And so what I'm going to do is go in there and give it to them because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to me and all the 30,000+ residents of the Maston District, right? It's theirs. Let's give it to them. Whatever it is that they need, let's figure it out and let's make a way to make sure that their lives are good in whatever way that is. And bring in the community, right? Let them lead in their communities, right? I want to help the block club leaders do whatever programming that they want to do on their streets and in their neighborhoods. That is what I want to do. I want to give the power to them and let them realize that they can transform their community. It doesn't even have to be me. I don't need to be the person, right? Yes, I have a plan. There are many things that I want to do. I want to work on housing. I want to work on our business strips, right? Bringing businesses back into our community on Jefferson, on Fillmore, on Bailey, right? I also want to make sure that our renters have access to programs where they can buy houses, right? I want to clean up these empty lots and rehab these dilapidated houses that are out there. But you know who has all the ideas? The block club leaders, right? Like I'm doing this for them, right? These are people who've never held any elected office ever, but are doing amazing transformational work in their community. I'm doing this for them so they can get access to the resources so they can continue to transform their neighborhood.
Yeah. So what about, two questions. Like the first one is, what about the people who are not in block clubs or don't vote? Like there's a lot of people who are not, they don't understand this. Like they think about government as president. So they'll vote in the presidential election. But when it comes to like the local elections, they don't really participate because they don't know what people do. So talk to me a little bit about what does a council person do and why should the average person in Maston care about that?
Right. They should care because first of all, politics is local. You can vote for president. Of course, we all vote for president, but your day-to-day quality of life issues is determinant on your legislators and your council members and your state senators, right? That is your direct line to making sure that your community is thriving. So those are the elections that and your school board, you should be voting in local politics. It's extremely important. Yes, voting for the president is important, but I am telling you, who's dictating what happens to your children in your school is the school board. So you have to vote in that election. That's who President Biden is not determining what's happening in your school. Absolutely not. That is the Buffalo public school system. And so we have to vote in our local elections. It is very, very important. And, and going back to the Buffalo Black Caucus, one of the things we did there was another seminar that we held was on civics. And that was another one that was supposed to last 20 minutes and it went over for an hour because people want the information. And that is one of the things when I do win Maston, one of the things that I'm going to do is make sure that we are doing regular, consistent civics engagement conversations in the community because people don't know what their councilman does or what their legislator does or what the state senator does or anything like that. And we have to start building up succession plans in this city, right? I'm not going to be here forever. The current administrations that are existing are not going to be here forever. So we have to start educating our children and the people in the community around civics. They have to know that this is their community and they can change it however way they want to. But we have to make sure that they're educated first.
Yeah. So specifically for Maston, but for the bigger picture, what do you see for Buffalo in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you
big
imagine?
change. For instance, this housing program that I'm going to do, that's going to target renters who live on the east side of Buffalo. That's number one. I see that. I've already had the conversations, right? I've reached out to banks and foundations and other legislators and council members in the area, and I've had meetings with them about this housing plan, and they're excited about it. And so what we do in Maston is going to transform the city because everyone is going to want to be a part of it. Yeah. And they're going to want that program existing in their neighborhood. We are going to clean up these communities and every day I am out on doors, knocking on doors, talking to voters, talking to people about what's going on in their neighborhood and the issues that they're having. And consistently every time it's about housing. It's about the dumping on empty lots. And, the one gentleman I spoke to a couple weeks ago was just talking to me about how there was like toilets dumped in an empty lot next to his house. And he rented a truck and removed them. Why are our residents doing that? Yeah. Right? That's not their responsibility. And, it's the responsibility of the city, but there shouldn't be so many empty lots for people to dump on. Right? Yeah. We have to do infilling in these communities because it's such a problem. Oh my goodness, it's such a problem. And businesses. We have so many amazing Black businesses across the city of Buffalo, but many of them don't reside in the Black community. Yeah. We need them here. We need to build up our business districts, right? I can't wait to get this program up and off the ground, right? Because we just have to give people what they're asking for. And they're not asking for a lot. And the things that I want to do in the Maston district, I'm going to start an advisory council, right? I feel like I should have a board that I answer to bi-monthly, right? I go in, I talk to them, tell them what I'm working on, but I want to hear from them because I want to talk to them about their neighborhoods and I want them to have input on whatever I do in the Common Council, right? And so there's so many things that I want to do. I wish we had time to run it all down. Right. But, and then another thing is opening a Maston district office, right? I can't sit up in the ivory tower. That's not even my personality, right? I need to be in the community. Yeah. And so we need an office in the community. I need to be on the ground in the community, talking to voters, talking to residents every single day about what's going on in their neighborhoods. And that's what it's about. And a lot of times, truthfully, there are some things that I won't be able to solve for people, right? But you know what people want? They just want to be heard. Yeah. Right? They want to be listened. They want to know that someone is listening to them. And that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do.
I love that. I have so many more questions. I really do have so many more questions, but
it's so much to talk about.
I'm looking at my time key. Are we good on time or do I need to wrap this up? Okay, I need to wrap this up. Okay, so I'll ask you this last question. Okay. How can people reach you and support and, just get on board with all of the things that you're doing? Like one thing they can do to connect with.
Oh my God. I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Please reach out. Send me a message. I'm at Senator Kennedy's office. I'm still working my day job. Yeah. Okay. So whatever you need, please just reach out to us. Ask the questions. If you want to, participate in campaign stuff, our campaign office is at the corner of Utica and Fillmore. We're there Monday through Friday, starting at around 3:00. And on the weekends, we're there all day from around 10 o'clock. But yeah, I'm around. I'm accessible. So if it's government work that you need help with, just reach out to Senator Kennedy's office.
Okay. One last question. Yeah. What do you think for those who are not in the East Side or, this podcast has a lot of business leaders and people who don't come from the East Side. What do you want them to know and to do to become a part of?
Be a resource.
Okay.
Be a resource of information. That means that if we have business, you know what I mean, communities on the east side of Buffalo. So if you're doing something in the Elmwood Village or in Allentown or wherever it is that you're doing something and it's working for your business community, call someone on the east side of Buffalo and say, hey, maybe you guys can do this. Be an ally, right? Bring the east side businesses into the conversation. Have them sitting at the table with you. Let them know how you're building up your business districts and stuff like that. Share information. It's just information, right? Information is power.
Yeah. And it's a two-way street because when they get to the table, they'll learn from the East Side businesses.
Exactly.
Because there's so much grit and ingenuity and innovation that happens there because we just have to figure it out.
We have to get to a point where we can sit at a table and just have conversations with each other because that is how communities grow.
Thank you so much for sitting at this table and sharing the information.
Thank you for having me.
Again, it is great to have you and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Talking Cities podcast with Matt Enstis and friends. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on all podcast streaming platforms. Talking Cities is brought to you by the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, dedicated to furthering economic growth, igniting urban revitalization, and building a strong, thriving community. Using our mutual city methodology, we foster conversation and collaboration among anchor institutions, partners in the community. Together, we address critical issues including job and business opportunities, healthy and active living, entrepreneurship, energy, access, and transportation. The Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, working together to change our city's future.